Good to be back. Haven't had a Volkswagen Beetle since 1974, and that's almost 40 years ago. My first one was a 51 model that I bought in 1967. Had it for 4 years and did 65,000 miles in it, 100,000 kilometers. So which year, which model can it be? Let's take a look at the bumpers first. That's the kind of bumpers that came in 1953, and they lasted up until 1968, when they were replaced by bigger bumpers. No turn signals up on the fenders, so that indicates it has to be before 1960. Large rear window came in 1958 and got even larger then from 1965. These are the kind of tail lights that were new in 1956. They lasted until last year, 1961, so it has to be between 58 and 60. It has to be a 58 or 59, and actually you can't tell the difference between a 58 and 59 because they're quite identical both on the inside and the outside. So this is a 59, which is equal to the 58 both on the inside and on the outside. And what was new in 1958 was a new larger front windshield and a new larger rear window and a new dashboard. And the incredible thing is that this 1958 dashboard was with the Beetle until they ended production in Mexico in 2003. 45 years lasting dashboard design. That's incredible. Few minor changes to knobs, etc. and trimming, but basically the same. Steering wheel, nice white steering wheel of the type that was introduced in 1956. Year after this one, 1960, came a new one with a recessed hub to give more safety to the driver. So let's give her a start. Manual choke on this one. The automatic came in 1961 with the 34 horsepower motor. So, okay. First thing you notice is the lack of power steering, lack of power brakes when you drive an old car. On the Beetle, the lack of power steering is really not a problem because it's so light up front. The lack of power brakes, well, that's something you just have to get used to. Push a little bit harder on the pedal, or quite a bit harder on the pedal than on a normal car, but the brakes are good. Anyway. So it's a fairly easy car to drive. Just is a little bit difficult to get used to sitting close up to the front windshield. And that the window wipers are so incredibly small compared to a modern car. It's a very pleasant car to drive. No flashing turn signals. There's a meter, there's a semaphore that you operate with a normal lever. And young people today don't even know what it is. But it was in Europe, used on the Beetle up until, well, this actually was the last year, 1959. In America, they had on the Beetle flashing turn signals from, I think, 56. Well, this is a 30 horsepower engine. That was introduced late 1953, December 1953. The 34 horsepower came in 1961, 2 years after this one. 30 horsepower, but it's a lightweight car, just 750 kilos approximately, 3/4 of a ton. Takes the car up to 110 kilometers an hour, or about 65 miles per hour. Gets a little bit noisy at that time. The engine is designed to work at full speed continuously, but you would get tired of the noise. Preferably you operate it at about, on the highway, about 55. Follows modern traffic, or at least the slower vehicles like the heavy traffic, which is limited to 80 kilometers an hour. Look how easy you can shift with this one. Up until 53, the gearbox was non-synchronized. You had to double clutch, you had to master the art of double clutching, which actually is that if you want to switch to a lower gear, you put it in neutral, bring out the clutch, give a little bit of gas and then move it. You don't have to do that on this one unless you want to go from from second to first. Then you better stop, or you better know how to double clutch. That was the way it was up until 61 with a new gearbox and the new engine. Noise level, well, not so bad. 74 dBA at about 50 miles per hour, 80 kilometers an hour. But of course much worse than on a modern car. Of course it has the air-cooled engine. It makes a bit more noise than a water-cooled engine. And you have the fan, the engine fan. Beautiful whining engine fan noise cooling the Beetle engine. And that's also the fan that's driving the heater system. And that's another issue, because people claim that, okay, the Beetle has a very poor heat ranging system. Well, it doesn't. Not before 63. On this model, the cooling air of the engine is taking into heat exchangers. Now first, actually, it's flowing through the engine. So it's being heated up by the engine in order to cool the engine. Then the air continues into the heat exchange chambers, where the exhaust tubes are going through, and it's further heated. Now this is more than sufficient, at least down to -5 degrees centigrade, or let's say a couple of 20 degrees Fahrenheit, no problem. But in 1963 they changed it. Dangerous. That you may extract fumes from the engine, oil fumes, and then if you have a leakage in the exhaust pipes through the heat exchangers, you might die. So they wanted to make what they called fresh air heating system. Larger heat exchangers, taking the air directly into the heat exchangers, and still being warmed by the exhaust pipes, but in this case it's large die-casted exhaust pipes that goes through the heat exchangers, so leak is highly unlikely, which is also is on this one, by the way. But the result, not very good. So from 1963 on, the Beetle had severe problems with the heating system, although it gradually improved. Look at the beautiful pastel colors, right? Very modern in 1950, 1960. And look how well this pastel green matches the white steering wheel, the white knobs. They had the white steering wheel up until 1966, where it was replaced by a black one, saying that the white steering wheel was dangerous because it could be reflected in the windshield, which is just nonsense. I've been riding a Beetle for 150,000 kilometers, never ever had a problem with the steering wheel being reflected in the windshield. Otherwise, when you cheat a little bit like I've done, not using diagonal tires but radial tires, the road handling on the rear-engined Volkswagen is quite okay. People complained a little bit during the 60s especially that the road handling was poor and it was oversteering because of the large weight in the rear. It did oversteer. It is sensitive to side wind, but as a vintage car, it's beautiful to drive. Well, it had four-wheel independent suspension, that's one thing. Low center of gravity. So it was a fairly good car to drive. But as other cars got more and more modernized when it came to road handling capability, then the Beetle during the 60s and 70s had a hard time to follow up. And that was actually what killed the Beetle eventually, because it cost so much to tame the rear engine. And you might enjoy really driving it on winding roads like this. And listen to the whine of the engine fan. So beautiful, right? Few people realize that actually the Volkswagen and the Porsche is more or less basically from the old age the same car. When Ferdinand Porsche designed the Volkswagen in late 1930s, then he also decided he would make a more typical sports car. So we made the Berlin model in 1938, and that was kind of a predecessor to the Porsche that was made as a prototype in 1948, using basically the same suspension, the same engine, the same everything, except for more horsepower on the engine, more, let's say, advanced, a little bit more advanced additional designs to steering, suspension, etc., but basically the same thing. So it was a Volkswagen Plus, the Porsche, when it started in 1948, with 40 horsepower instead of 25. Fairly comfortable to drive because of the independent suspension on all four wheels. But basically the Beetle was technologically stable during the 50s and the first part of the 60s. Much more changes took part towards the end of the 60s and throughout the 70s.